Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time for my Week 7 power rankings for the 2025 UFL season. This is probably the single hardest power rankings video I've had to make in a while. The fact is, you had a couple of games that were complete blowouts involving one team being a middle-of-the-road team who blew out a poor team, and one where it was a team that was a little bit higher than middle of the road, beating what was considered the best team in the league. But because of also having a matchup between two of the top three teams from last week, it's a very tough power rankings to make, and essentially the 7 and 8 spots are the only two spots that are pretty much unarguable. Everything else, there's at least two teams that realistically have an argument for every single spot. So this is going to be a tough one. I'm also going to be going over each player or each team's best player 6 weeks through the season. So without further ado, let's get started with number 8, the Brahmas. They're one of the two teams that I think we all know exactly where they go. Look, I'm not going to spend too much time on this team because it's basically a broken record at this point. Their defense is absolute trash. It is done, despite the fact that you have a couple of great linebackers, right? You still have Jordan Williams and Devontae Beckett, which is a great combo. The rest of the defense is essentially non-existent. It is pretty much those two guys, and that's about it. When you look at how this team has been playing, they just allowed 26 points to the Stallions, who are still dealing with quarterback issues. Both their quarterbacks in this game got a bit of minor injuries, and it was already their QB 3 and 4, yet you still allowed them to put up 26 points on you. You put up 3 points. Your offense has been trash pretty much all year. You had 2 good weeks. Then week 3, you got kind of found out, and then in week 4, it was even worse. Again, you got beat in time of possession by almost 10 minutes. You got almost twice as many yards put up on you as you got. Points allowed, you're dead last. Yards a game allowed, you're dead last. Third down percentage, you're also last. And you and Memphis are pretty much dead last in that aspect. But when you're 2% worse than the team that already is terrible, I mean, there's not much to say. This is one of the two spots that everybody knows who goes there. Number 8 is the Brahmas. I don't think a single person's going to argue that. And it's a shame because this team last year was able to transition from a couple of kind of fluky wins to being a great team. And we expected them to have a good season. Now, I thought they were going to miss the playoffs, but I thought that was just going to be because of their home field situation. In reality, it's just because this team isn't that good this year. Whether it's the whole A.J. Smith controversy stuff, whether it's Wade Phillips, dealing with an illness. This team is just not good at this point in the season. They had 2 weeks where their offense looked okay, and even in one of those games, they won in large part due to a return touchdown. So, number 8 is the Brahmas, not much to say. Now, their MVP through 6 weeks and best player is Jordan Williams. This is close between him and Devontae, but Williams has done a bit more extra things. Like, Devontae does have like a half sack, but Jordan Williams is up there in both solo tackles and tackles. But more importantly, he does have that pick 6 that he had against the Panthers, right? When Perkins threw that pick 6 at that very inopportune time. And he has 2 passes defended and 3 TFLs. There's really no one on offense I could give this to. McFarland has been just invisible too much this season. Kirkland hasn't been the same guy we saw as last year. No quarterback for this team has played all that well. Mon was okay for a few weeks, but then he just, yikes. So, I'm giving this to Jordan Williams. This is one of the two bottom teams in this list were pretty hard to think of a true best player because part of the reason they're just not good this year is because they don't have that single guy that's like clearly the best player. But I was debating giving this to both Beckett and Williams, went to Jordan Williams, so giving him my best player for the Brahmas. But again, just like with the team itself, there's not much to say. They're the Brahmas, they're at 8, nobody should be shocked. And nobody should be shocked at number 7, the Memphis Showboats. Another easy one to put. Yes, they kept it close against Houston, and it's hard to judge Houston because, again, Memphis looks better and better pretty much like week in and week out the past 3 weeks, but they couldn't get it done against Houston. Now, the addition of Wes Hills proved to be a huge move for them. He already looks like a top 5 running back in the league through 1 week, right? We'll have to see. We have to let him, be there a couple more weeks, see if something doesn't get got. But when you compare what he's been doing to Abram Smith, and both these guys had terrible leg injuries, and Wes Hills had less time to recover, yeah, it's looking really good if you're Wes Hills. Now, rushing yards per game, your team is getting better in that front, but still, you're still last at 80 per game. Third down percentage, like I mentioned with the Brahmas, you are right there with San Antonio for being one of the 2 worst teams in the league. And your turnover differential is still horrid. You got that 1 interception That's it. You've gotten one turnover in the entire season through 6 weeks. I mean, that's pretty terrible. I mean, there's not much to say. Now, yes, David Davis was inactive. Hall was inactive. So if those guys are healthy, maybe get the W. But like we'll talk about as the best player. But like Jay Adams, as I mentioned, he hasn't been great the last couple weeks. Like Dresser Wynn has been a much better quarterback than Perry. Well, let me rephrase that. I said it in one of the live streams this past weekend. It's not that Wynn is a better quarterback than Perry and Williams. It's he's a more consistent quarterback. The fact is, the highs of Dresser Wynn have not been anywhere near what T-Will or EJ gives you. The difference is he doesn't have that floor that those two guys give you, where there'll be times where T-Will will just throw inaccurate passes and just kind of waste a drive, or EJ Perry will just throw back-to-back interceptions. You don't have that, but he's not a great quarterback through the couple of games he's played so far. He is overall better and more consistent, but in a battle between two consistent quarterbacks, the better quarterback won, and that was Jalen McClendon. So, Showboat's number 7, not much to say. Best player, I'm going with Steel Chambers. Again, very hard to pick somebody. I'm not going to give it to West because of 1 week. I'm not going to give it to Wynn because it's not like he's a massive upgrade over the other two quarterbacks. I'm not going to give this to Jay Adams, who basically has done only a little bit the past 3 weeks. So I'm giving this to Chambers. Now, Chambers is currently second in overall tackles and tied for second in solo tackles. Does have a TFL, but that's pretty much about it. It's just tough. I was debating on giving this to Hall as well. If you wanted to give it to him, I would be fully for that. He's been really solid when he's played. It's pretty much one of these two guys. But I'm giving it to Chambers. Linebackers, being a tackling guy, doing really solid right behind Gidna and all those stats. So, giving it to him. But it was a tough pick. Again, the Showboats and the Brahmas are clearly the two worst teams in the league, but number 7, the Showboats. Coming in at number 6 is going to be the Arlington Renegades. Now, I know some people might be shocked about this, but they fall 4 spots for me. Now, I understand that, yes, I had him pretty high in the rankings last week, but I was one of the few guys who really didn't punish him too hard to losing to DC. Now, that was because at that point we viewed DC as the best team in the league, as I kept them at 1 after the loss to San Antonio. But when you combine the fact they just got annihilated by Michigan and the fact that Arlington just blew another close game against the St. Louis Battlehawks, you have to fall. At this point, it's getting hard to defend this team at all. Look, I know people are going to try and make the argument they could easily be 6-0. I could easily make the argument that they should be 1-5, right? Your Week 2 matchup against Houston, you let Houston get the touchdown late in the game, and they just failed the 2-point conversion. They convert that, they might win that game. Birmingham, look, the fumble was terrible. That should have been Arlington's ball. But you want to know something else? You shouldn't have gone 0-4 in the red zone. That's on the offense. That's not because of the refs. Week 4 against the Battlehawks, the game that looks like you won by a good margin. You really didn't, right? You got a pick 6 at the end of the game, so eliminate that touchdown. Then what about the early game? You mean when Manny Wilkins tore his Achilles and you just picked up his fumble for a touchdown? Yeah, you basically lost that game. You got outplayed. Then DC, you blew a 15-point lead, nothing to be said. Teamu threw a game-losing interception and they still won the game. How is that possible? You throw a game-losing interception and win the game? Nobody knows except Bob Stoops in Arlington. And then this week against St. Louis didn't even play that good, and they still beat you. So, you have to fall. You deserve to. Because it's getting hard to defend this team mainly because of Bob Stoops. I hate to say this because I've defended him for a while, but at this point you have to ask the question, is he unironically the weakest coach in the league now? And I'm talking about full-time head coaches, okay? So, not talking about interims with Jim Turner and Shannon Harris. Granted that Shannon Harris is doing a pretty damn good job, or Peyton Pardee. When you look at the 5 head coaches, it's Curtis Johnson or Stoops, and that's not even a joke. Because when the entire issue last year was you were losing and blowing close games that you shouldn't lose, and this year, the same thing is happening. When you're a team that is taking a lot of penalties, you are up there in penalties and penalty yardage. That falls on coaching. When you're blowing games that your defense is holding teams to under 20 points, again, aside from DC, the defense has held every team to under 20 points, yet you're not undefeated in those games. It falls on coaching above all. Yes, Perez has not been his normal self from last season, but Stoops is a huge reason why this team is having issues. The defense is incredible. It's like last year. Last year, the offense was incredible, but the defense wasn't good. This year, the defense is incredible. The offense isn't great. Kalen Ballage, he had that huge 77-yard touchdown run in week 1, so everybody assumes he's been a great running back. If you eliminate that rush, he really isn't in the same stratosphere as a lot of these other running backs. The ground game, not good for this team. Stoops hasn't been incredible coaching. In this game against St. Louis, he iced his own kicker. The play got reviewed, the touchdown got reviewed, and he tried to challenge the review. And in doing so, he got his own kicker iced to where they then missed the field goal. You have that field goal at the end of the game, it's a different story. You're only playing for a field goal. So, it's aggravating. They have to fall down. Until they win a game, they're just going to keep falling. And I mean win a game, not win it by like some random everything goes wrong for the other team because their quarterback gets hurt and they fumble the ball away for a touchdown, or the week 1 game against San Antonio. Because so far, their wins of all the 3-3 teams, despite one of those teams being Houston, who have only beaten the Brahmas and Showboats, the 3 wins for Arlington are probably the 3 least impressive wins of any of the 3-win teams. Because they easily should have lost to the Battlehawks, and they almost blew it against the Roughnecks. And that week 1, week 2 Brahmas team was horrid. So, number 6, deservedly so. Hate to say it, it's the Renegades. Hopefully they can get a win and get bounced back and move back up, but for now, they deserve to fall this far. Now, when it comes to their best player, I'm going to still go with Ajeen Harris. Harris, so far, is still first in interceptions. He may not have gotten one this week, but he's still first in that, and he's still third in overall passes defended. Now, Odom has an argument for this, for sure, but overall, I think Harris deserves this still. He should have gotten what would have been the game-winning interception against Jordan Ta'amu and the defenders. But, of course, the offense wasn't able to do anything with the ball, and then the DC defenders got a second chance. So, he also had that pick 6 against, obviously, the Battlehawks. Yes, it was at the very end of the game, but at that point, it was still a huge play for them that ended the game because the Battlehawks had a chance to win the game. So when you add those together, him having a lot of solo tackles, yes, I know that coverage-wise, he hasn't been insane this season, but overall, he's been a huge reason why they have won the game against St. Louis and should have won the game against DC if they didn't blow that lead. So, best player going with Harris, though Chris Odom has a very good argument for it if you want to give it to him. Now, coming in at the number 5 spot is the DC Defenders. Again, moving down 4 spots. It's hard to not do this when you didn't just lose, you got your asses handed to you. This was the most embarrassing loss of the season. This team came in as pretty much everybody's number 1 team in the league, and you got annihilated. I mean, Michigan destroyed you. Bryce Perkins was like number 5 on trending because of what he was doing to this team. This defense looked awful. Missed tackle after missed tackle. Look, points allowed, they're now the second to worst team in the league. Their yards per game is still not the worst, but the last 3 weeks of the season, and yes, I know one of those was the punt return touchdown, but the last 3 weeks of the season, the opposing teams have all scored over 20 points. 24 points? I mean, look at it. It's literally going in the worst order you can see. It went from 11 to 12 to 15 to 24, 33, 38. So if that trend continues, they're about to allow 40 points this upcoming week. Just think about that. Now, turnover differential, still best in the league, but it's getting weaker. Yards per game, they're still barely first, but again, a lot of that is because of the turnovers by the defense. The defense getting all these takeaways is the biggest reason why their offensive stats look as good as they do. Ta'amu was a perfect example of that. In this game, we saw Ta'amu at his peak Ta'amu. Great first quarter. Rest of the game, basically non-existent. He made like 2 great throws the whole game. The rest of it was the issue. He's not a consistent passer. 50 completion percentage. Not good. 11 TDs, really good. 4 interceptions, not great. Taken 6 sacks, not the worst. Pass rating, not insane. The fact is, he is, in this season, the second best QB in the league. But a lot of that is just because he's had weak quarterback play this year, and the fact that a couple of these guys just haven't played enough to fully justify that spot. At the end of the season, we could easily be seeing Jalen McClendon being the second best QB in the league, or hell, even Dresser win at this point. Not really, but Ta'amu's stats that he's leading are mainly because of the defense. When the defense is getting you so many extra drives, yeah, your stats are going to look good. The issue is he's just not consistent. That second, third quarter was rough. I mean, he started the game with like 7 of 9 or something like that, and then he just went super inaccurate mode. He did finish the game above 50 completion percentage, but that was all because of the first quarter. When you look at this team, they are trending super far down. The loss to San Antonio, bad loss. Then the Renegades. Yes, you pulled it off, but you shouldn't have never been in that position to have to come back down 15. And then Michigan, you got blown out. When you look at it, right, you did get the win against St. Louis. That's your most impressive win in the season, was the week 3 win against St. Louis, because week 1 Birmingham with how Alex Smith was playing, you know what I mean? But if you eliminate that, your last 3 games are rough. When you look at these teams in the top 6, the only reason Arlington is worse than you is because their season looks worse. But this is like the worst 3-game stretch of any team in the top 6. And arguably of every team in the league besides San Antonio. And even then, San Antonio at least beat DC. So, you know what I mean? It's hard to not put this team down. I gave them the benefit of the doubt when they lost to San Antonio. But they lost again too soon. Right? It's like what I did with the Stallions last year. They lost to San Antonio. I kept them at 1, and then they proved it was the right decision. DC, looks like it might have been the wrong one. They fall, and they deserve to fall. The injury to Ty Scott has really hurt this offense. The receiving core is basically one guy, and that one guy is Chris Rowland, my best player for the DC Defenders. Te'amu doesn't even deserve an argument for this one. It's Chris Rowland. What Rowland's done this season for this team is incredible. Legitimately, yes, Perkins is by a mile the MVP favorite right now. But honestly, Rowland deserves a good second place mention. I didn't even have him in my top 5 ranking, if I remember correctly, but after this week, he deserves to be number 2 on that list. Look at all these rankings. Receiving yards, best in the league, check. Best in the league in all-purpose yards, check. Second in scrimmage yards, check. Tied for first in receiving touchdowns, check. Second in receptions, check. Yards after catch, check. Kick return yards, check. And 7th in punt return yards. He is up there in all of those stats. That is remarkable. He deserves to be the best player of this team. He's the only reason this team even was watchable against Michigan, because he made multiple big plays in that game against Michigan. His ability to be great at returning both kicks and punts, the fact that he's been the most consistent receiver on the team, obviously that's healthy because Ty Scott's injury. Who else are you going to put as the best player for this team? No one else is even really close. Te'amu's a huge reason why they're not incredible, because of the fact that he's too inconsistent. Ty Scott got hurt. Amir Smith's done nothing all year. Their defense has been pretty bad the last couple of weeks. But Chris Rowland, man, hats off to him. He's been incredible. He deserves this honor being the best player of the team through 6 weeks. Now, coming in number 4 is going to be the Roughnecks. I can't believe I'm putting them there, but they are. Look, the last 4 weeks, they're 3-1, and their one loss was by a touchdown to Birmingham. When you actually look at it, they kind of deserve this spot. The game against Arlington, they played Anthony Brown and nearly pulled that win off. You eliminate the week 1 game against St. Louis and just look at the last 5 weeks. Are you really going to say this team shouldn't be this high in the rankings? And I mean that. Yes, they won against San Antonio and Memphis. But so did Michigan, right? And we just saw Michigan to DC. Now, the Roughnecks got their 3rd quarterback, who's been incredible. This team wasn't even fully healthy against Memphis. Yes, Memphis had injuries, but Marcus Sims wasn't playing for the Roughnecks. So they were without one of their big weapons. They are looking really solid. Their yards per game is still one of the weaker in the league. 235, not great, but it's getting a bit better. But guess what? Turnover differential, all of a sudden, who's second place? The Roughnecks. Yeah, despite all the turnovers Anthony Brown caused, Jalen McClellan's been safe enough with the ball, even with a couple of freak interceptions that have happened, like, the random tip ones. They're the second best team in turnover differential. Points allowed, they're 4th despite the week 1 game. Again, their last few games have been incredible. They barely lost to Birmingham. It was a touchdown game. The Memphis game, they looked better most of the day, and they got the win. San Antonio, they crushed them, and technically speaking, they crushed them more than Birmingham did because they forced the whole quarterback issue. And then the game against Memphis the first time, we all thought Memphis was going to get that W, and Houston pulled it off. Yes, it was a very close one, but at this point, you have a team that's trending up in the Roughnecks. They're looking better and better week in and week out. You've got a quarterback that is a legit QB in Jalen McClellan. You've got a great receiving core that wasn't even at full strength in this game. And Kirk Merritt has looked really solid since he's been back. So your offense as a whole is getting better and better. Your defense has been a solid unit minus the first week. You kind of earned your spot at number 4. Now, are you going to keep it? We'll see. You got to keep winning. But for now, they deserve this spot. It's hard to not put them above the Renegades or the Defenders when the Renegades and Defenders have both been looking worse and worse over the last few weeks, whereas Houston's looked better and better. Do I think they're going to keep the spot? Personally, no, but they might. I mean, you can't really argue that they don't look better than Arlington or DC because Arlington's been blowing so many games. And even back in week 2, it was a 2-point conversion away from being a tie game with like 20 seconds left. So, number 4, somehow, the Roughnecks. Now, coming in as their best player is Jalen McClendon. Now, yes, this is purely because of the fact that he's the most important player. Overall, Justin Hall probably gets this one. But when you look at this team's success, it's because of McClendon. McClendon has been the best QB on this team by far. Yes, passer rating is not as good as Nolan Henderson. But it's important to note that one of those interceptions was like a real freak interception. And the most important thing is that completion percentage. He has been a wildly efficient passer. And despite the fact that you would say he's been a checkdown merchant, he's averaging more yards per attempt than either of the other two quarterbacks. Anthony Brown was just terrible, all things considered. Nolan Henderson on the ground was really solid. But, that's pretty much what we'll give him a lot of credit for. Yes, McClendon has fumbled the ball a few times, but he's not lost them. He has rushed for a touchdown. He can get some yardage, but overall, it's the efficiency while passing. This season, efficiency has been a big issue for quarterbacks. McClendon's been great in that aspect. He's throwing the ball accurately. Yes, sometimes when it's the short passes, he's throwing it a bit too fast, but very rarely do you see a throw and be like, man, that was a terrible throw by McClendon. You see that all the time with like Te'amu. We've seen that a lot with the Showboats quarterbacks. You've even seen it a bit with Perez, but you don't see it with McClendon all that much. Now, again, best player overall, you could easily argue this should be Justin Hall or, a defender, but I'm going to give this one to McClendon because he's been the reason this team is winning all of a sudden because he's been such a good quarterback for him. He almost pulled it off against Birmingham, and as a starter, I mean, he is 2-2 as a starter. So, best player given to Jalen McClendon. Now, number 3 is the Stallions. I know some people are going to put this team at number 2, maybe even 1. I don't think they deserve that spot yet. The fact is that Memphis loss is still too fresh on the brain. And the Brahmas win, I mean, we just saw Houston pull it off, right? That's kind of the thing that kind of justifies Houston's spot. The fact is they just pulled this one off. When you look at Birmingham on the season, quarterback play is the biggest question mark because they have now basically played 4 quarterbacks with all of them dealing with some sort of injury. Corral's probably done for the year. Magoo is still out for a few weeks. Peasley and Cook has took some big hits this game, so hurts there. Now, defense, you're the number 1 team in points allowed, not yards per game, but points allowed. Though a lot of that is just because you haven't had one of those true, outlandish games where you allowed, 30 points like we've seen with the teams like Houston and DC. Third down percentage, they're the worst of the 6 teams that aren't terrible at it. Now, again, when you compare, 6th to 1st, it's not, the biggest difference in the world, but they are still one of the lower teams there. The fact is this team, they're 4-2, and at the end of the day, they've won. Once you eliminate week 1, they're 4-1. And yes, the one loss was an OT. Arguably, if Skip Holtz didn't fumble the challenge, or not really him, but the guys who told him the challenge didn't fumble the number, maybe they pull it off. You never know. But they did beat Houston. It was a close game. They did pull it off. They did just beat the Brahmas by a wide margin. They do have the win over Michigan, though that was a while ago, the Danny Etling saga, so a lot of asterisks there. The fact is that head-to-head win pretty much doesn't matter at this point. That was in week 2. We're heading into week 7. So, number 3, I'm giving it to the Birmingham Stallions. They're not full. Again, even with how the number 1 team, you can probably guess who number 1 is, there's still not a true definitive number 1 team in the league yet, but Stallions will give them 3. Now, their best player is still Deion Kane. Even though he wasn't insane in this game against San Antonio, he's still been overall the best player for the team. He is 4th in overall receiving yards in the entire season. All-purpose yards, he's 3rd. He's been a great kick returner. He's 5th in kick return yards. He's averaging almost 30 yards per kick return, which is very solid. 2 receiving touchdowns. Again, heading into this week, they pretty much only were winning games where he was actually balling out. So best player, I think it's still Deion Kane. He's been a very, very good receiver for this team, which we kind of expected. He's always been a very great player for the team. He did get some kind of, issues without Corral. Corral was always guaranteed to have one deep play to Deion Kane. But even then, Kane is still a great receiver and definitely deserves this honor. So, best player for the team, Deion Kane. Number 2 is the St. Louis Battlehawks. They don't move at all. Well, they move at 1 spot, my apologies. They move at 1 spot and they deserve it. They have the league leader in punt return yards, sacks, and they're the number 1 rushing yards per game team. Now, when you look at it, Hot Rod easily could be best player of the team, not giving it to him, but easily could. They have the most accurate kicker in the league. Dude has not missed a kick, and he's kicking hard field goals. He hasn't kicked any 60-yarders, but he's kicked multiple 50-yarders and making them. Defense, they're one of the best teams in points allowed and yards per game. The biggest issue with this team, though, is Max Duggan. That's the biggest reason why I can't put him at 1. The fact is, 2 of the 3 games he's played, he has not looked good in. This game was another one. 7 of 19 is a horrible stat line. Yes, he did hit that 10 yards per completion I love to see, but he took a couple of sacks to where overall he only had just under 60 actual passing yards. So when you look at him, passing-wise, he hasn't been great. Again, 2 of the 3 weeks he's looked bad. Now, is that just an Arlington thing? Again, he's taken a lot of sacks against Arlington, so is that an offensive line issue? Is that just a bad matchup for him? Again, last week, right, you had the Blake Jackson big touchdown. So when you saw that, Hakeem Butler's stat line, half of that wasn't even done by Max Duggan. So the jury's still out on him. But it's not like Anthony Brown where it's like, dude, you're bad. It's just the jury's still out on Max Duggan. But they're staying at number 2 because of the fact that even though they did beat the number 1 team, it was a very close win where it was heavily due to the Panthers playing Danny Etling. And obviously, let's call it what it is. Michigan just beat the number 1 team in the league by 30. I mean, it's pretty, well, not by 30, but you know what I mean, almost by 30. It's pretty hard to justify or not justify the team beating the number 1 team by 24 to not be at number 1 when they were already a team that was just below St. Louis. So you had 2 teams right next to each other. One of them barely beat Arlington. The other dominated DC. I mean, it's kind of obvious who has to go number 1 in my opinion, but St. Louis deserves the number 2 spot. They look to be the best team in the XFL Conference. And as of now, it looks like the championship matchup might be St. Louis versus Michigan. As for the best player for St. Louis, it's Jacob Sailors. Look, I know the past couple weeks hasn't been insane. The fact is he is still the league leader in rushing yards. Again, despite Ballage having that 77-yarder, Sailors is still the league leader in rushing yards. He's averaging 3.9 yards a carry. His longest is only 25. It's not like he's being heavily carried by one long rush. He has 4 rushing touchdowns, hasn't fumbled the ball yet. Receiving yards, he's 13th in the entire league. He leads the league in scrimmage yards. Again, because of this week, it's hard to say, but it is still possible he could finish the season with 1,000 scrimmage yards. Now, he'd have to start stepping it up because this past weekend really hurt that total and that dream of that, but he could have some stupid, just absolutely stupid yards per scrimmage number. Yards after catch, he has 228. He is a great screen pass guy. Overall, I think he has to get this one. It's pretty hard to not give him the number 1 spot here for the best player on the Battlehawks. I think right now he's still probably 3rd or 4th in MVP rankings. If a Battlehawk's going to get it, it's going to be him. He's been incredible for this team. So best player, giving it to Sailors. Number 1 is the Michigan Panthers. You beat DC, you put up damn near 40 points, and you beat them by 24. Not much to say. Number 1 player in tackles is Gidna. He's looking back to being his DPOY kind of self. He's not going to win it this year just because of how many other great players there are, but he's going to be an all UFL linebacker. Third down percentage, they're the best team in the league. They're almost 50%. That's insane. What they did against DC, they put up 400 yard total offense. They put up almost 200 both in the ground and in the air. Third down, they were over 50%. They were 4-4 in the red zone, absolutely insane. When you look at their stats, yards per game on defense, they're the 2nd best team in the league. They've allowed a decent amount of points, but actual yards per game, they're one of the best. Offense, they are a yard point 3 behind DC. So you could easily say they have the best offense in the league, and they really do, because that's a lot because of the turnovers DC's gotten. Overall, the best offense has been the Panthers. Danny Edling versus Bryce Perkins is like 2 different teams. With Perkins, this offense is just insane. There's a reason why Perkins is the MVP favorite and was number 5 on trending. And let's not beat around the bush. Best player on the team is Bryce Perkins. When you look at his stats, he's 3rd in passing yards, 1st in completion percentage, 1st in passer rating by a country mile, 2nd in passing touchdowns, 1st in yards per pass, tied for 7th in interceptions, despite not starting technically, but playing in every single game. 8th in sacks, despite playing in every game. 8th in rushing yards, despite doing nothing the first 2 weeks of the season. Tied for 1st in rushing touchdowns, but he is tied for 1st in fumbles. Though he hasn't lost a fumble. He has 2 turnovers. He has 12 touchdowns. He is right behind Teamu in overall points scored because he scored a lot of points in the extra point as well. But the biggest difference is he's not turning the ball over nearly as much as Teamu is. Nearly as much, but he's just not. Teamu, the whole thing is he's throwing the ball deep, but he's thrown so much that his yards per pass takes a nosedive. Whereas Perkins, he's just throwing it deep. He is starting to look like what we saw the last 2 weeks of the season last year, which is somebody who is efficient, a deep passer, a rusher, and evades sacks. He is getting sacked less than one time per game. That's insane. When you have a guy like him who's a dual threat quarterback who extends plays, it's insane. There's so many times he could have been sacked in this game, but he made some great move or just kept moving his legs, made a big stiff arm, and just kept moving. It's the biggest concern as well because of the injury thing, because he did take a couple of big hits. Danny Etling ended up coming in for like a play or two because Perkins took a big hit he didn't have to. But when he's on the field, he's the MVP of the league this year, right? I know everybody hates when a quarterback gets it every year, but no one's going to argue that the MVP of the league so far is Bryce Perkins. We've seen that now. When you compare Etling to him, this team is undefeated when Perkins is the full-time quarterback. When he's not the full-time quarterback, they're not undefeated. The St. Louis game, they put Danny Etling in. He threw an interception, led to a Battlehawks touchdown. Wouldn't you guess the Panthers lost by a touchdown? The Stallions, Danny Etling didn't play well. Special teams was awful, but they didn't play well. Yes, Perkins had the terrible 2nd and 8, but the bottom line is Perkins has been the best player in the league. Those first 2 weeks were weak performances by him. Well, week 1 was a great performance, but not in the ground. Since week 3, he's just been on a truly another level. Again, he's leading the league in passer rating by over 20. I mean, when you see a stat like that being dominated like that, it's hard to not look at him. Like, he is combining the Perez efficiency of last year with not the insane ground game Martinez had, but almost that. Like, he's being a great rusher now while still being an efficient and dominating passer. Yes, Toa has been great, but half of that is because of Perkins running the ball. With Perkins running the ball, it's done what I said would happen. It's opened up the offense. Since he started rushing in week 3, you now have to add that as an element to this offense. They could do a read option, and when you're able to do a read option, it makes it harder for a defense. If your running game overall gets better, which it has because of both Tawa and Perkins, now the play action game gets better. Play action can make it to where it's a lot easier of deep throws, and unlike other quarterbacks like Teamu will be inaccurate with it, Perkins has been a very accurate passer. He's been incredible this season, easily the MVP so far. Will he win it? We'll see, but so far it looks to be that way. Number 1, the Panthers finally get it. Again, I know some people had him at number 1 earlier in the season, back when I said there was no way. They deserve it this week. I can't believe they're finally at number 1. Will they keep it? Honestly, I doubt it. With how this season's gone, I wouldn't be shocked if both them and St. Louis somehow lose this week. But overall, that'll do it. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We're trying to hit 1250 subscribers by the end of the UFL season. We're like a little bit under 100 away, so it'd be cool if you could help there. Think about becoming a community member for 99 cents a month. You get an exclusive video every month. You get multiple team emojis. You get 6 separate team emojis as well as a bunch of other benefits. If you also leave your power rankings down below, who do you have on your rankings? Number 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Who do you think are the best players? And as always, guys, have a great night.